The silence in the consular ship seemed to weigh more than it should as Anakin Skywalker watched the stars pass at light speed. His fingers drummed nervously on the console, and the cold sweat on his forehead betrayed nights poorly slept. The nightmares had become unbearable visions of Padme crying and calling his name, the feeling of helplessness consuming every fiber of his being. He could no longer ignore the signs, not after losing his mother the same way, unable to save her when she needed him most. This time would be different, he swore to himself as he adjusted the coordinates for Alderaan. The decision was made, and nothing would make him change his mind, not even the Jedi Council or his obligations as a general of the Republic. Bail Organa received Anakin in his private office at the royal palace of Alderaan, surprised by the unexpected visit from the young Jedi. Anakin's habitually confident expression was replaced by something more vulnerable, almost desperate. "Senator Organa, I need to trust you with something that few know." Anakin began, his voice laden with urgency. Bail nodded, indicating he could speak freely. "Padme and I are married. I violated the Jedi Code, but she is everything to me. I have been having visions of her dying in childbirth, and I cannot let that happen." Bail maintained his composure, though the revelation was shocking. "You need a safe place for her," he concluded, immediately understanding the situation. "Alderaan has always been a refuge for those seeking peace. Your wife will be welcome here for as long as she needs." Padme did not protest when Anakin explained his plan, for she had also felt the change in him, the growing fear that threatened to consume him. Accompanied by R2, D2, and C-3PO, she settled into comfortable quarters in the palace, far from the curious eyes of Coruscant. "Ani, are you sure this is necessary?" she asked, holding his hands as he prepared to leave. "I cannot risk losing you, Padme. These visions are real. I know they are," he responded, his voice trembling slightly. She touched his face gently, seeing the pain in his eyes. "Then go, do what you need to do. But come back to me, to us." He kissed her forehead, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, and departed back to Coruscant, determined to discover the origin of these terrifying visions. The truth revealed itself more shockingly than Anakin could have imagined when he finally confronted Palpatine. The Chancellor, his mentor, his friend, was actually Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord who had been orchestrating the war from the beginning. "You can save Padme, Anakin. Only the dark side possesses that power," Palpatine whispered seductively, his words poisoned like bitter honey. Windu's fall sealed the Republic's fate on that fateful night, and Anakin made his choice in the shadows of the Chancellor's office. "Teach me, my master. Teach me to save those I love," he said, kneeling before Sidious. The new Emperor smiled triumphantly, knowing he had conquered the most powerful piece on the galactic board. Anakin led the attack on the Jedi Temple with the 501st Legion, his mind focused only on acquiring the knowledge necessary to prevent Padme's death. Afterward, he was sent to Mustafar to eliminate the Separatist leaders, ending the war once and for all. Obi-Wan Kenobi, unaware of Anakin's whereabouts or his fall to the dark side, remained in Coruscant processing the tragedy that had befallen the Jedi Order, unable to locate his former Padawan for a confrontation that would never happen. When Anakin returned from Mustafar, still intact and without the scars that fate might have reserved for him, he flew directly to Alderaan. Padme was in labor when he arrived, and his presence beside her, his love and determination, was enough to ward off the death he had foreseen in his nightmares. The twins were born healthy, Luke and Leia, small miracles wrapped in soft blankets as they cried their first cries. "See, Ani? I'm fine, we're all fine," Padme whispered, exhausted but radiant. But the joy was short-lived when Anakin revealed the dark truth. "Palpatine has established his empire. Together, we can dominate the galaxy, bring true order and peace." Padme looked at him with growing horror, realizing she had lost the man she loved to something much darker. "You're insane, Anakin. I don't want to be part of this," she protested vehemently. But her words fell on deaf ears, and Anakin, now Darth Vader, took her against her will along with the babies, bringing them back to Coruscant, where his new life as the Emperor's right hand awaited, with perfect health and Padme alive, but a prisoner at his side. Bail Organa knew he could not keep the secret to himself, not when the fate of the galaxy was at stake and the last Jedi needed to know the truth. He contacted Obi-Wan Kenobi through secure channels, requesting an urgent meeting away from the watchful eyes of the newly proclaimed Empire. When they finally met on a remote moon, Bail recounted everything he had witnessed in Alderaan. How Anakin had brought Padme for protection, how he returned transformed and took her away against her will. He has fallen, Obi-Wan. Anakin Skywalker no longer exists, only Darth Vader remains, Bail said with deep regret in his voice. Obi-Wan felt his heart shatter upon hearing the words, the confirmation of what he feared but hoped was not true. Yoda, who was also present via hologram, shook his head sadly. Lost to the darkness, young Skywalker is, save Padme he wished, but condemned himself. The decision to go into exile was made quickly, for remaining in Coruscant or any central world meant certain death at the hands of Imperial Inquisitors. Obi-Wan chose to accompany Yoda to Dagobah. Obi-Wan looked back one last time, seeing the stars that represented worlds he had sworn to protect, now under the Empire's dominion. Guilt consumed him, constantly questioning what he could have done differently to save Anakin. In the cold corridors of the Imperial Palace in Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker walked with the authority of one who commanded entire fleets with a simple gesture. He still thought about destroying Palpatine, but not yet, for he needed to learn everything the Emperor knew about the dark side before taking the throne for himself. He divided his attention between the Emperor's orders, executing dissidents and crushing nascent rebellions, and his family, whom he kept in luxurious but constantly monitored quarters. Padme was watched 24 hours a day by Imperial guards and security droids, unable to take a step without Anakin knowing. You could have everything, Padme. Be my queen when I take the throne, he would say during his nightly visits, his yellowed eyes reflecting the corruption of the dark side. She stared at him with a mixture of love and despair, seeing traces of the man she loved buried under layers of darkness. There is still goodness in you, Ani. I know there is. Come back to me, to the light, to your children. She would plead, trying to reach the heart she still believed existed beneath the emotional armor he had built. A full year passed under Emperor Palpatine's regime, and Anakin grew even stronger during this period of darkness. He learned about the dark side from Palpatine, delving into ancient Sith texts, practicing forbidden techniques that would have horrified his former Jedi masters. He became a true Sith in every sense of the word, not just a fallen Jedi, but a devoted practitioner of the Sith philosophy of power through passion. His powers grew exponentially, exceeding even Palpatine's expectations, who watched his apprentice with pride mixed with growing caution. Anakin reached the peak of his powers, capable of manipulating the Force in ways that few in history had achieved, feeling the entire galaxy pulse through his veins. But with great power came great paranoia, and the nightmares he thought he had banished by saving Padme returned with new intensity, showing him terrible visions of betrayal and loss. The nightmares of Palpatine killing Padme and the children to have him completely at his disposal became too frequent to be ignored. Anakin would wake covered in cold sweat, feeling the Force scream warnings he could no longer dismiss as mere paranoia. He will never allow you to be truly free while you have something to lose, a voice whispered in his mind, perhaps a last remnant of his Jedi conscience. The realization hit him like lightning. Palpatine would always manipulate him through his love for Padme and the children, keeping him as an eternal servant instead of a legitimate successor. The anger this understanding generated was unlike anything Anakin had felt before, pure and focused like a lightsaber blade. He confronted Palpatine in the Imperial throne room, and the battle that followed made the walls tremble and the windows shatter. Anakin channeled all his fury, all his power, and when Palpatine launched his characteristic lightning, Anakin redirected it back with a force amplified by the Force, consuming the Emperor in his own destructive energy until only ashes remained. The years passed under the rule of Emperor Vader, who maintained the Imperial structure but governed with less open cruelty than his predecessor. When Luke turned 5, his training formally began with Anakin, who saw in his son the promise of an heir worthy of his legacy. The boy venerated his father, watching him with admiring eyes every time Anakin demonstrated his powers or told stories of glorious battles. Anakin taught Luke to pilot everything from modified TIE fighters to star cruisers, and began to instruct him in the ways of the dark side, showing him how to channel emotions into power. "Anger is not weakness, my son. It is strength waiting to be unleashed," he would say as Luke practiced basic movements with a training saber. Padme's heart broke as she watched from afar, seeing her son being molded in the image of the fallen father. But she could do nothing without putting both children in danger. Leia at least was spared by Anakin, who allowed her to stay with her mother, perhaps recognizing in her the same fiery spirit that had made Padme so formidable, or perhaps simply not wanting to repeat the same pattern with both children. More than 10 years passed under Darth Vader's imperial rule, years that transformed the galaxy and shaped a new generation. Luke and Leia became adults, each following drastically different paths under the same imperial roof. Leia became extremely cultured, studying galactic history, diplomacy, philosophy and arts with Padme, and the best tutors the Empire could provide, though her true interest lay in understanding the Republic that existed before the Empire's rise. She spent countless hours with Padme, listening to stories about the Senate, about Naboo, about a time when democracy meant something real and tangible. The two shared a deep connection, a silent understanding that they were prisoners in a gilded cage, watching the man they loved sink deeper and deeper into darkness. Leia had inherited her mother's indomitable spirit and her father's fierce determination, but directed these qualities toward preserving her humanity instead of embracing power for power's sake. Luke, on the other hand, became a superpowered Sith, relentless in his devotion to the dark side and to his father's vision of order. He was almost as powerful as Anakin, capable of bringing down entire squadrons of enemies with the Force, of sensing disturbances across entire star systems, of inspiring terror in his adversaries with his presence alone. Anakin knew that Luke would be his successor and meticulously prepared him for that destiny, teaching him not only combat techniques but also political strategy and manipulation through the Force. Luke served as his father's right hand, leading campaigns against the rebel alliance that had formed in opposition to the Empire, crushing resistance cells with brutal efficiency. When father and son fought side by side, they were a force of nature, two hurricanes of destructive power that left devastation in their wake. Luke venerated Anakin not only as father but as emperor and master, genuinely believing they were bringing order to a chaotic galaxy, unable to see the contradiction in maintaining peace through fear. Anakin was not perverse as Palpatine had been, did not find sadistic pleasure in the suffering of others or in gratuitous cruelty. He saw the Empire as a necessary tool, a way to prevent the chaos that had characterized the Clone Wars and protect those he loved from future threats. But he was lost in the dark side, blinded by the power he had accumulated over the years. His decisions were dictated by cold logic and preservation of the regime he had built on the ashes of the Republic, unable to recognize how he had become exactly the type of tyrant he had once fought against. Padme saw this clearly, and the pain in her eyes every time she looked at him was a constant stab at whatever humanity still remained in his heart. He convinced himself that everything was for her, for the family, for stability, but the truth was that the dark side had rooted so deeply that he could no longer distinguish his genuine motivations from the rationalizations he had constructed. The change began unexpectedly when Leia ordered her private ship to stop at Alderaan during an official diplomatic trip. She wanted to personally meet Senator Bail Organa, the friend her mother mentioned so fondly and nostalgically whenever she spoke of the old days. Bail, now considerably older but still sharp as ever, received her with initial caution that quickly transformed into emotion upon recognizing Padme's features in the young woman before him. "You are the image of your mother when I met her in the Senate," he said with a choked voice. It was then that Bail spoke about the day of Leia and Luke's birth, about how Anakin had brought Padme to Alderaan seeking protection, about the transformation he had witnessed. "There are others who knew your father when he was still Anakin Skywalker, before darkness consumed him," Bail carefully revealed. He spoke of the location of the Last Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Master Yoda, hidden in Dagobah all these years, awaiting a moment that might never come. Leia's decision was made instantly, driven by years of silent frustration and desperate hope. She traveled in secret, navigating through the dense swamp until she found the simple hut where Ben Kenobi lived alongside the former Jedi Grand Master. When she entered, she felt something different in the air. A presence in the Force that was completely opposite to the suffocating and dominating energy that emanated from her father and brother. Yoda and Ben observed her with surprise and renewed hope, seeing in her not Vader's daughter, but the heir to a greater legacy. Ben spoke of an Anakin like the one her mother described before the fall, a brilliant and compassionate young man, impetuous but pure of heart, who dreamed of freeing slaves and protecting the innocent. Powerful Jedi your father was, there is still goodness in him, buried deeply, but not dead, Yoda said with his hoarse but wise voice. Leia saw there a side of the Force very different from what she knew, not based on domination and fear, but on harmony and protection, and a decision crystallized in her mind. Luke should meet these masters. He could bring Anakin back to the light if he knew the true positive side of the Force. When Leia returned to Coruscant, she sought Luke in his private quarters, away from the watchful ears of imperial servants. I discovered something extraordinary, brother. Something that will change everything you think you know about our father, she said, her eyes shining with urgency. Luke watched her with growing curiosity as she revealed the existence of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, the last Jedi Masters who had trained Anakin before his transformation into Vader. He was fascinated by the revelation that Jedi still existed, warriors of an order he knew only through imperial propaganda and his father's brief disdainful mentions. They knew our father when he was different, Luke. They can show us who he really was, Leia insisted. Luke felt something stir inside him, a curiosity that Sith training had never completely satisfied. I will go, he finally declared, but our father must never discover this. This must remain between us. The journey was made in absolute secrecy, with Luke personally piloting an unmarked ship through obscure trade routes. Arriving at the swampy planet, he finally met Ben Kenobi and Yoda in person, and the emotion he felt surprised him. Ben observed the young man with eyes that shone with unshed tears, seeing in him both Anakin and Padme, both potential for greatness and for redemption. They spoke about the Jedi Order, about the principles that guided it, about the training Anakin had received at the temple before the Clone Wars. Your father was the chosen one, prophesied to bring balance to the Force. I still believe he can fulfill that destiny, Ben said with conviction that had survived decades of exile. They shared stories about Anakin before the fall, his victories in the Clone Wars, his friendship with Obi-Wan, his compassion for those who could not defend themselves, things Padme did not know or could not articulate through her pain. Luke was happy to meet his father's master, understanding for the first time the depth of the fall Anakin had suffered. Yoda and Ben spoke about the Force in a much deeper way than Luke had learned from his father, not as a tool to dominate others, but as a living current that connected all beings, that demanded respect and harmony instead of control. More powerful than anger, love is. More lasting than hatred, compassion is. Learn this, you must. Yoda taught, his words penetrating defenses Luke didn't even know he had erected. Then he made a decision that would change the galaxy's fate. He would no longer participate in the Empire as he had done. He would bring his father back to the light, no matter how long it took or what sacrifices were necessary. Luke returned to Coruscant with a heavy but determined heart, knowing that confrontation with his father was inevitable. He waited for the right moment, when Anakin was alone in the Imperial throne room, meditating on the movements of the Rebel Alliance that had recently won small strategic victories. Father, we need to talk, Luke announced, his voice echoing through the ornate walls of the empty hall. Anakin opened his eyes, his yellowed irises shining with curiosity and something close to concern upon perceiving his son's serious tone. I will not be your successor, Luke declared without preamble, planting his feet firmly on the marble floor. You must relinquish power. All of this is wrong, Father. The Empire, the oppression, the fear we use to control the galaxy. It is not what the Force should represent. It is not what you should be. The silence that followed was deafening. With Anakin processing words that seemed impossible coming from the son he had personally trained for years. Anakin's expression gradually hardened, initial surprise giving way to the cold anger that characterized his Sith nature. You have been corrupted by foolish idealists, he said slowly, rising from his throne with deliberate movements. His lightsaber ignited with a characteristic hum, the red blade bathing the hall in crimson light. If you wish to leave, wish to abandon everything I built for you, then you will have to defeat me first. Only the strong deserve to choose their own path. Luke felt the Force pulse around him, felt the weight of the decision he had made finally materialize into real consequences. He ignited his own red saber, adopting the combat stance his father had taught him since childhood. But this time he would fight not to conquer, but to liberate. Then so be it, Luke responded, his voice firm despite the fear that threatened to paralyze his limbs. They faced each other as two Sith at the peak of their powers, red lightsabers cutting through the air in lethal arcs that would have sliced durasteel like butter. Luke fought with everything he had, channeling the Force through every strike, every defense, every counterattack he launched against his father. But Anakin was simply superior, decades of experience and accumulated power giving him advantage in every exchange. They moved through the hall in a deadly dance, their sabers creating dancing shadows on the walls as energy crackled between them. Luke tried to use Force lightning, launching bluish bolts that Anakin absorbed or redirected with disdainful ease. With a movement too quick for Luke to follow, Anakin spun beneath his son's guard and cut off his right hand, the lightsaber and hand falling together to the floor with a horrible sound. Luke screamed in pain, falling to his knees as he held the smoking stump where his right hand had been moments before. Anakin stood over him, saber still ignited, looking down with an expression that mixed triumph and something that could be regret. "I am your father. Never forget that," he said with a grave and authoritative voice, extending his free hand as energy began to crackle at his fingertips. Force lightning danced between his fingertips, ready to punish his son's insubordination with excruciating pain that would remind him of his place. Luke closed his eyes, preparing for the suffering that would surely come, when a voice he knew as well as his own cut through the air. "No!" Padme came running into the hall, followed closely by Leia, both with expressions of horror and determination. They had felt the disturbance in the Force, or perhaps simply maternal and fraternal intuition, and ran to prevent the tragedy that was unfolding. Leia immediately placed herself between Anakin and Luke, her eyes burning with defiance as she faced her father without fear. "Stop this now," she ordered, her voice echoing with authority that rivaled the Emperor's own. She knelt beside Luke, quickly checking his wound before returning her furious attention to Anakin. "Luke is right, father. You must relinquish power. Look at yourself, look at what you've become. About to torture your own son for daring to disagree with you." Leia's words hit Anakin like physical blows, forcing him to truly see the scene before him. His wounded son at his feet, his daughter defying him with eyes full of disappointment, all surrounded by the symbols of an empire built on fear and blood. Padme approached slowly, her hands extended in plea, tears running down her aged but still beautiful face. "Anakin, please, listen to our children. Listen to me, for the first time in years." Padme took a deep breath, gathering courage to make the offer that could change everything or destroy what little remained of their family. "I promise I will be your queen, Ani, but the queen of the man I met on Tatooine, that sweet boy who wanted to free slaves and help people. Not the queen of this monstrous empire that devours worlds and crushes hopes," she said, her voice trembling with contained emotion. "Come back to us, to the light, and hand over power to the Senate. We can start over, far from all this. Naboo still waits for us. Ani, the landscapes you loved, the peace we always sought. It's all there, waiting for you to make the right choice." Her words penetrated the defenses Anakin had built over the years, reaching something deep inside him that he had buried under layers of rationalization and the dark side. He looked at Padme, saw the desperate hope in her eyes, the same hope she had kept alive for more than a decade waiting for this moment. Anakin slowly lowered his head, the weight of his actions finally fully registering in his consciousness. He looked at Luke, saw his wounded son bleeding on the floor, the hand he himself had cut off, and something inside him broke. Memories came in a torrent. Padme and Naboo, smiling as they ran through the fields. His mother telling him to be strong and do what was right. Obi-Wan trying to reach him before it was too late. all the moments when he had chosen power over love, control over compassion. The lightning dancing in his hand dissipated, and he turned off his lightsaber with a click that seemed to echo through eternity. "Call Bail Organa," he finally said, his voice hoarse with suppressed emotion. Leia felt relief flood her body, while Padme covered her mouth with her hands, barely able to believe that her words had finally reached the man she loved. The negotiations that followed were tense but productive, with Bail Organa representing the remnants of the Galactic Senate that had operated underground for years. Anakin established terms for the transfer of power, insisting on amnesty for those who had served the Empire in good faith, protection for his family, and a role in the reconstruction to come. Bail accepted all terms as the Senate's representative, understanding this was the best chance the galaxy would have for a peaceful transition back to democracy. Documents were signed, proclamations were issued, and slowly the Empire began to dismantle as the Republic was rebuilt on its foundations. Padme kept her promise, and they went to Naboo as she had always dreamed, to live in peace far from the galactic spotlight. The village near the lake where they spent their secret honeymoon welcomed them back, and for the first time in decades, Anakin felt something like genuine peace. Leia became Senator of Naboo, representing her mother's home planet with the same passion and eloquence Padme had demonstrated decades before. She quickly established herself as a powerful voice in the new Senate, advocating for reforms and restorative justice for worlds devastated by the Empire. Luke, his hand replaced by an advanced cybernetic prosthesis, went to Coruscant with a different purpose: to begin a new Jedi Order that would learn from the mistakes of the past. As he organized the reconstruction of the Jedi Temple, overseeing construction teams and studying ancient texts recovered from secret hideouts, he received an unexpected visit. The doors of the partially reconstructed temple opened, and a solitary figure entered through the Coruscant sunlight. "Hello there!" A familiar voice echoed through the empty hall. Luke turned quickly and saw Ben Kenobi, his aged face split by a genuine smile for the first time in years. "Need some help, my young one? Building a Jedi Order is hard work." Before Luke could respond, a second figure emerged from the shadows behind Ben. It was Anakin Skywalker, no longer Darth Vader, wearing simple Jedi robes and carrying a blue saber instead of red. His eyes were blue again, clear of the dark side corruption that had yellowed them for so long. Anakin looked at Luke with a mixture of pride and humility, and extended his hand to his son. Luke accepted it without hesitation, feeling the Force flow between them harmoniously for the first time in their lives. And together, father, son, and old master began the work of bringing true balance to the Force and renewed hope to the galaxy.